subject matter, which were not that many at the time, contacting me. And it led to then working with lawmakers in Congress at the time, working on amendments to the bill. And that experience was extraordinary because I never really saw myself doing that. And then the immigration reform bill had died. And so then it was very disheartening because I had invested so much hope for myself as well as my clients. And I thought, what do I do? And I thought, well, I'm going to write to President Obama. And I thought, I don't know how many people write to the president, but I sat down and I wrote a 7-page letter saying, you've got to have executive order at this point. It's the writing's on the wall, the House will never pass it. And luckily, my husband, who's a patent attorney, his friend had come into town, who's a professor at a law school, and he looked at my 7-page letter and said, nobody's going to read that letter. So he helped me edit it and said, look, you just wanted to do executive action, just say that. And the 7-page became 1 page. And I sent the letter and I made sure that it was sent through our local senator, and I didn't get a response. And I sent it again, and I sent it again, and eventually I got a letter from the White House that said, thank you for your letter. But I was happy because I would never send it again. But that then led me to think that I can actually write to the White House. And in the meantime, I'm working on various other policy issues, not only the startup visa, but the startup visa was my pet cause that led to knowing the power of the law, the power of the advocacy, the power of the tools that we have learned as lawyers. And so I was researching one particular area of law that I thought executive action could win. And I drew charts and diagrams, and I had the good fortune of meeting some of the staff members at the White House at the time. And I sent another letter to the White House with all my charts and diagrams, and really, pleading, can you please, please, please do this action? It will be controversial, but it will be impactful, and you don't need Congress. And that didn't make the executive action, but it's something I'm picking up right now, 4 or 5 years later, and in the future maybe I'll talk about it. But when immigration reform died and all of these happened, I was very fortunate that I was able to be on Hillary Clinton's immigration team. And it happened because of all the work I was doing up until then. And in the meantime, my business has grown. I cannot do all the free stuff, the volunteer stuff that I do, which is more than 50% of my time, without the amazing team that I have at my office, Watson Immigration Law. And I've trained various attorneys, and I can confirm what Chantal was saying, that you train people and often you don't keep them. But they are definitely a source of help as well as pride to see them go out. But I have a core team, and everybody in my team is just amazing. So I would come back from something and meeting, and I'd say, well, I signed up for something else today, and they'll be like, no, you didn't, because signing up by me means signing up for them too. And I have a very funny story about a radio station had come into town, and I realized that I could actually, really make complicated immigration issues simple. And I thought, well, I could now have a message on the radio. And when the radio station sold the marketing thing to me, I thought, really, I could do this. I'm going to give it a try for a month, and then we'll see where it goes. And I came back and I said, hey, I signed up for radio. And they said, what time is it? I said, I don't know. What are you going to talk about? I'm not really sure. And it kept a series of questions. I had no answers to them. But what I did know is this is an exciting opportunity where I can get my mission of philanthropy, my mission of information out there to people. And I eventually figured it out. And the very next day, my paralegal came back and said, I have to show you this video clip. It's of this show that was set in Vermont, and I forget the name of the show. He comes from television. He had the very same answers that I did. No, when his wife asked him, which TV show are you going to be on and what are you going to do? So anyway, the radio show, I had no idea I would love it so much. So after a month of being on the radio just to try it out, I actually had a show for 2 years, and I'm now turning it into a podcast that I'm collaborating with a local publication called the Seattle Globalist. And so that's been a very interesting way to actually get the information out to clients who are being affected, community that's being affected, organizations that need help. And so all of this is happening while I'm doing my volunteer work. And so after the Hillary Clinton election was lost, for a week I just cried. And I didn't know what to do, because I really, the very last call, I said to people, well, transition, please call me. I just want to be able to talk to people as they're trying to make changes. I don't need to be in DC, I don't need to do any of that, and my husband had already said, we're not moving to DC. So I just wanted to be on the phone to be able to give guidance on the things that I'm seeing on the ground. And so after a week of just having people over for dinner so I wouldn't, have a noose around my neck, I came up with the idea that if I can't guide where it's necessary at the federal level, maybe I can guide people at the local level. And a friend of mine said, oh, Tamina, if you have an executive committee here, I want to be part of it. And I thought, oh, that's what we're going to need. Because the rhetoric was that immigrants are bad, and you know what the rhetoric is. And as soon as the inauguration happened, the worry was what was going to happen. And nobody actually thought it was going to be this bad, but we knew it was going to be bad. And so I went to our local Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, the Washington chapter, and said, you've got to give me a committee. We need a committee for what's coming. And I had created a committee in the past. It wasn't very easy, but this time they just paved the way and said, okay, go have your committee. And we called it the Response Committee. And just as a non-profit, and I'll talk about that very soon, a new committee in an existing organization needs to maybe go to step on other people's toes, and it took a couple of months to sort of give the vision of what we will be doing. By the time we had our mission statement, and we actually did draft one, I used that time to let organizations know, law and policymakers know that we are in place as a response committee. Because what I realized at the time is that nobody knows immigration law the way immigration lawyers know. But immigration lawyers don't necessarily think of themselves as policy analysts. They don't necessarily think of themselves as guidance for people. Lawyers are just, there to work with the law that exists for their clients. So I had people in place. And so when the very first executive order was signed on that Wednesday, the mayor's office had invited me along with other organizations. I stood behind him as he was talking about the executive order that was about interior enforcement and the border wall. And people didn't really, people were still grasping at what that really meant. And then came Friday, 5 p.m., when the executive order for the travel ban was signed. And that Wednesday, 6 were leaked, executive orders were leaked, 2 were signed. And then the public charge executive order, the travel ban, these were all leaked, but they weren't signed. But Friday, 5 p.m., I will never forget it in my life. It came down, and I didn't move from my desk. The calls were coming in from everywhere. The emails were just everywhere. My husband saw my face. He took the children away. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old now, but he saw that I needed to be in action. So I was then getting emails from policy lawyers in the state, basically saying, hey, can you give analysis for this part of the law? I was getting calls from the CARE, Council of American Immigration Relations, saying we have passengers stuck at the airport, they're in the air, and it was all chaos. I mean, everybody remembers chaos. And so the chaos was coming at me from everywhere, and I was wondering, how do I deal with the intake at this point? So I then went to the committee members, and I didn't tell you this, but as soon as I could form the committee, I went to the AILA Christmas dinner, and I stood over people's shoulders, saying, please sign up to my committee. And when you say committee, people just run away. I really had to convince them. If you're an expert in this, then I will only call you for 15 minutes. And I was trying to take some of the experience I had in the Hillary team about how they had formed it with experts. And so I had 13 names on my list. But 5 p.m. Friday, not a lot of people are sitting around their computers. And so I really had to send a lot of emails to say, hey, can you do the analysis for this because so-and-so needs it? So-and-so needs a call, a lawyer for this, can you help? And so I managed to get through that evening. I didn't sleep for 3 days, I think. And I got invited to speak at a rally that Sunday. It was my first rally speech where there were just heads, I don't know how many thousands of people were there. And so I was preparing my speech, and I had my editor help me with my speech while I was tending to this chaos. And so I was playing with a Google sheet to see what would happen with this. And you know, this is where Takao, my co-founder, my wonderful co-founder Takao is right at the back there. He was at the airport, and you will hear his story from his perspective. Somebody had put me in touch with him. And so we were coordinating. And so the week had begun, Monday had come along, the chaos continues. And then the following week, another colleague of mine, Greg McLawson, who couldn't be here today, but hello Greg, if you get to see this, he comes back and he was on our committee saying, what are we doing? And so he's a technology, you know, guru. And, you know, I was saying, hey, you know, I'm trying to take intake. How do I do intake of all of this? So Greg, Takao, and